Let's begin here with tensions between the United States and Iran escalating dramatically overnight. It all started early Sunday when Iranian President Rouhani cautioned President Trump about pursuing hostile policies. Rouhani said, quote, "America should know that peace with Iran is the mother of all peace, and war with Iran is the mother of all wars." Last night, he got a response via tweet, of course.
President Trump warning Rouhani in all caps, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh is live from London with how all of this unfolded. Good morning, Nick. A lot of people waking up on Monday having no sense how this started.
Certainly, and I think bear in mind all of this plays very conveniently into a president who is struggling to perhaps distract people from the consequences of the Helsinki summit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Here, suddenly, we have a whole new sphere of American foreign policy being reignited here. Now, some of this potentially links into a speech by US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. We'll get to that in a moment, but we're coming to an area here in Iran where the decision to take apart the nuclear deal, for the US to withdraw from it, has potentially left many of European nations who want to do more business with Iran more vulnerable to sanctions. That's potentially put pressure on the Iranian oil market, certainly in the months ahead. They have in turn threatened to potentially disrupt supplies heading through the Gulf near Iran there. But the broader point is that this is being phrased as a bid to try and put increased pressure upon the relatively moderate Iranian government of President Hassan Rouhani, who was involved in that Twitter war. They've been accused of being basically wolves in sheep's clothing, but basically not being moderates, but being jihadist extremists, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in a recent speech. Here's what he had to say about that broad government.
The bitter irony of the economic situation in Iran is that the regime uses this same time to line its own pockets while its people cry out for jobs and reform and for opportunity. The Iranian economy is going great, but only if you're a politically connected member of the elite.
Now, there clearly have been a lot of grassroots protests inside Iran because of mismanagement, because of the collapse of the local currency there. In fact, Mike Pompeo referred to a $95 billion slush fund that was run by the Iranian regime to sort of support its various interests. A quick reality check. We're not suddenly about to see war between the US and Iran unless things escalate wildly, but this is a very delicate region where the balance between Lebanese Hezbollah to the north of Israel is precarious, where Israel is involved fundamentally a lot in Syria, stirring tensions there as well. Iran is heavily, deeply involved in Syria too. There's a lot that could go potentially wrong there. And a tweet like this, well, some say maybe they'll find like they were with North Korea. There are negotiations 3 months from now. We simply don't know. There's an element of distraction here, but also an element of saber rattling too. Back to you.
Trump versus Trump. One reason why there is such a stark divide in America, such a disconnect between Trump's true believer and his detractors, is that there are always two narratives about what he's doing. This week, there was just one summit, but there were two Trump stories. Let me show you what I mean. When Trump publicly sided with Putin on Monday, the press didn't blink. Anchors and experts called out the concerning behavior.
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president.
This is nothing short of treasonous because it is a betrayal of the nation. He is giving aid and comfort to the enemy, and it needs to stop.
We are living in a national emergency.
That was the consensus view. Even some Fox News stars said Trump had screwed up. But his most loyal promoters, like Lou Dobbs, swore they saw a different Trump on stage. Dobbs said the real disgrace was the media.
Trump disappointed the left-wing national media. Woof. I think the president handled himself perfectly.
Woof. I mean, here's the thing. Even Trump knew it wasn't perfect, because he came out the next day and clarified what he said and said he still supports U.S. intel. That was all the pro-Trump media needed to hear. The counter-narrative was now set.
The president comes out to clarify his remarks today.
He made it very clear he had misspoken.
You have just witnessed the single worst 24 hours in the history of your mainstream media.
The guy is doing what he's supposed to be doing, and that is protecting us.
Do you think he should have been tougher?
Yeah. Look, what was he supposed to do? Take a gun out and shoot Putin?
No. So there you have it. Two Trumps for two entirely different media ecosystems. And the result was that the base held. Brand new today, a Washington Post ABC News poll finding that overall only 33% of Americans approved of Trump's handling of the Putin meeting. But if you break that down by party, you'll see 66% of Republicans approved of his performance. Let's bring in Olivia Nuzzi. She's the Washington correspondent for New York Magazine, and David Zerwick, media critic for the Baltimore Sun. Olivia, what did you see in the pro-Trump press this week? The talk shows, the radio hosts, the web bloggers. Were they trying to create confusion or just absolutely defend Trump no matter what?
Well, it was interesting to see the sort of mild criticism initially from people at Fox News like Abby Huntsman and other personalities who are typically pretty much just in defense of him. They don't sound unlike his own press shop. But obviously that was very short-lived, and everyone kind of got right back on track, defending him and kind of just giving him the benefit of the doubt in a way that, if you are just looking at this objectively and taking his statements for what they are this week, you really can't do with a straight face. It didn't surprise me because we usually see this from Fox News. It's not as though it's a departure for them to take his side. But they're really, more and more, I think, there is just no difference between what his own press shop says, what someone like Sarah Huckabee Sanders says, and what Jeanine Pirro says, or any of the other hosts on Fox News. They really are just an extension of the White House communications shop, to the extent that, of course, Bill Shine is now, inside the White House.
And to your point, the president gave 4 interviews this week. 3 of those 4 were with his friends, Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson at Fox.
You almost can't call them interviews. I mean, they really are just conversations where they are allowing him to kind of just spitball.
We need a different name for them, I agree. The third one was with CNBC's Joe Kernan, and also a very friendly chat. But then the 4th interview was with a nightly news anchor, CBS's Jeff Glor. I wonder, David, do you think Glor asked tough enough questions? I mean, he was the only one that really had a chance to find out what the heck happened in Helsinki.
Yeah, it's tough in this climate. You know, if you look at it, sort of stand back, Glor did ask follow-up questions. He asked some firm questions. I would say firm rather than tough. I'll tell you something that bothered me. If you look at the body language of just the way they sat there, Glor was leaning back, Trump was leaning forward. There's a lot of symbolism in that interview. I would like him on the edge of his seat, leaning forward into Trump for a press that's more aggressive. I don't want to, I'm not criticizing Glor, but there were so many times when he could have followed up, like when Trump trashed Brennan and the former intelligence officials. I think it wouldn't have been out of line to stop and say, wait a minute, you just called him a total lowlife. You know, is that language appropriate? Why did you choose that language? It would have got combative, and I'm guessing maybe the bosses at CBS would not have liked it. But this president, Brian, as you said earlier, absolutely demands different kinds of coverage. And we have to be firm at every point with him. So I would have liked to have seen Glor be more aggressive. But on the other hand, as a network anchorman, he has a kind of different posture in terms institutionally of how he can behave in that interview. The other problem is with Trump is that you don't get anything from him. You know, CBS was saying, oh, he got him to admit that he holds Putin accountable. He got Trump to admit that he holds Putin accountable. Well, he sort of said that. He said, well, he's in charge of the country, so yeah, he would be in charge.
I would hold him accountable. He said, I would hold him accountable. Wait, hold on. He attacked the country.
Yes, yes. But then Trump, you know, I don't know if it was before or after, because it's all a blur with him of lies, but then he said, well, it could be the Russians, could be a lot of other people again. So you got nothing out of him when he said it could be him. I think with Trump, you really do need to press harder. I smile because I've criticized Chris Cuomo sometimes when he was on the morning show, when he'd really go at somebody. I think that's almost the way you have to interview Trump. I'm going back. This isn't an apology to Chris, because I've written about it.
Hey, I'd love for Cuomo or anyone at CNN to get an interview with Trump. Let's look at one clip of the Glor interview. Let me show you one part of the Glor interview. It's when Trump had to trash the media. Let's watch.
The level of dishonesty in your profession is extremely high.
But the press covered the substance and the wording of that press conference accurately.
I don't care what they covered. They didn't cover my meeting.
Because we weren't able to be in the meeting, and we have no idea what happened, Olivia.
Right. I mean, I was watching that, as you probably were, thinking, well, that would be a good time to say, well, what happened in the meeting? Why don't you release a readout, a transcript? Is there any recording, et cetera? But it's very easy to sit here as people who did not interview Donald Trump, however much we would have liked to this week, and criticize Jeff Glor, criticize the network. But I would say he's a very difficult interview. And I was thinking a lot this week while watching this interview and thinking about his performance, the journalist, about Piers Morgan, who did a very interesting story from Air Force One during this trip about his interview with Donald Trump and his time on Air Force One. And he explained, he's obviously a longtime friend of Donald Trump. He was on The Apprentice. He's not a journalist like you are, or like I am, or somebody who will go after him. But he was very critical, and he explained that his approach to that interview is because Donald Trump is just going to say what he's going to say, instead of hitting him over the head, I think with a hammer is how he phrased it in the piece, he wanted to get his answer on as many different topics as possible. He wanted to just get him on the record as much as possible on as wide array of topics as possible. And I think that's a very interesting strategy. I think the key might be to find somewhere in the middle where you do follow up, you are critical, you are tough when he says things that are outright lies. But at the same time, you don't want to spend the entire interview having an argument that's not going to get anywhere. And we have so few opportunities to really question him from people who are not just sycophants, who are not just his friends at Fox News, that I think there is a lot of value to just getting him on the record as much as possible on every newsworthy topic that we need to hear from him on.
Except I'm not sure. Getting him on the record, we have a concept of, oh, you're on the record, you said this, and it means something. I think with Trump, that's what I was trying to say. It doesn't mean anything to him. He's been on the record.
Because he's going to contradict himself the next day or say something
immediately,
opposite.
So when Piers Morgan gives that strategy of my strategy of this interview is to get him on the record, I think it's in some ways meaningless, and you're giving him a forum to just run all of this stuff out there, and he doesn't care if it's true or not.
Tucker Carlson was a forum to just, run all this stuff out there and spitball, and they just were having sort of a friendly conversation. But I think that because he is so rarely interviewed by actual journalists from actual networks, actual mainstream outlets who are going to question him on the sorts of things that we want him to be questioned about, I do think that there is value in just asking him the questions that we think about every day, that we wish somebody would have an opportunity to ask him. I'm not saying that we should all take what Piers Morgan said as like an instruction manual and then only do that. But I do think that there is a lot of value to just using that opportunity to kind of ask him about as much that we can ask him about in that time. And I think that it's easy to sit here and say he should have done this, he should have done that, but it's a very difficult interview. It's very difficult to keep him on topic.
That's for sure. Olivia, David, thank you both for being here.